Namaskar and good evening. Thank you for being here. It's almost the end of second day and end of this wonderful forum. Uh, our session is Interpolar Dialogue and the Himalayas, which is kind of more following session of what we have heard in our previous session about science. A lot of scientific findings of what we have known about this region. And now we come to policy and actions, what we need to do on the available results, findings, and what we know. So, in my opinion, we're meeting here in a very rather a historic fashion. India has hosted this Arctic Circle India Forum for the first time in New Delhi here, bringing about 80 speakers from 16 different countries across 30 sessions to explore how Hindu Kush region countries can foster collaboration with Arctic states and extensively participate in conversation to shape the future of polar governance, science, and cooperation. The opening day yesterday already sparked vibrant discussions on inter-regional collaboration. We discuss about delicate balance of economic growth with climate actions in complexity of rapidly changing global arena, and discussion on crucial role of indigenous community and voices, human rights, which should be put in every policy equation. So if nothing else, we have learned that diplomacy isn't just treaties and dialogue. It's about building trust, respect, and courage to listen across the borders, cultures, and generations. And that is what we are trying to do here in our session. Today's plenary is our springboard to Arctic and Hindu Kush Himalaya region collaboration. Think of it as the initiation of Cryosphere corridor, spanning from Ganga, headwaters to Ganga, to the Greenland fjords. That's what you call, I think, my pronunciation. It will serve as a fast-moving stream of scientific knowledge, ideas, indigenous wisdom, community-driven actions and solutions, economy and practices, and so forth. This is the collaboration of where Sherpa's insights meet Sami's survival strategies. It is a pathway of anchoring stories into adaptation and practices and actions. So without a further ado, I would like to invite our honored, distinguished panel of global leaders and experts who present some of the most important voices in the climate science, governance, and communities across the cryosphere. Please join me in welcoming them with a warm round of applause. So our panelist has already been introduced, but again, I'll briefly introduce them so that all of our audience are well acquainted. Our first panelist is Her Excellency Catherine Jakobsdottir, Chair of Polar Dialogue at the Arctic Circle Assembly and former Prime Minister of Iceland. She is a global voice for climate diplomacy, equity, indigenous rights, and global peace. So our second panelist is Dr. Pema Gamcho, Director General of ICIMOD and former Minister of Agriculture and Forest Government of Bhutan. He is a leading figure in transboundary cooperation and mountain sustainability in the Hindu Kush region. He is a very prominent and influential and visionary leader for our generation. Our third panelist is Professor Kamrul Hussain, research professor at the University of Lapland, a scholar of Arctic legal governance and indigenous right. And our fourth panelist is Professor Hiroyuki Inomoto, project professor at the Arctic Environment Research Center and the senior research fellow at Sasakawa Peace Foundation, a leading expert in polar science and integrated cryosphere monitoring. And finally, our fifth panelist is president of our organization, Ocean Policy Research Institute, OPRI, at Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Professor Michutaku Makino. He is a professor and chair at Atmosphere and Ocean Research Institute, AORI, at the University of Tokyo as well. And myself, Santosh Kumar Roniar, project advisor and project lead of Third Pole Project at OPRI, Sasakawa Peace Foundation. And warm welcome to you all from Japan and India and Arctic Circle. To formally open this session, I would kindly request our panel member to shed lights on 4 thematic areas. So this session has 4 thematic areas. First thematic area is how we can integrate, or what would be the process of integrating the HKH region into global cryosphere governance. It's a very, very big term and very complex, but we will try to find a pathway or at least give an answer or initiation of that process in this session. Our second thematic area is transboundary water governance and climate security approaches through this dialogue. Third thematic area will be science policy collaboration for cryosphere monitoring and risk management. And finally, the fourth thematic area will be indigenous knowledge, local community practices, capacity building for climate adaptation. So these all are very complex areas, but we are talking about policy, so we'll just briefly try to understand what would the initial step we can take to realize these mechanisms. So moving to the first session, integrating the Hindu Kush region to global cryosphere governance, I would like to request Ms. Catherine, Dr. Kamrul, and Dr. Pema to shed 2 minutes lights on this, how this Hindu Kush region can be integrated in global cryosphere governance through this dialogues, Arctic Circle dialogue or forum. Ms. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Chair. And of course, even though these are 4 thematic questions, they are all interconnected. And you could say that they are all connected to the fact that we're talking about global challenges, transboundary challenges, but at the same time, regional interests and regional ownership of territories and countries. So this is a balance that we need to bear in mind. And when you talk about how we can integrate the Hindu Kush Himalaya area into the global cryosphere governance, I believe that we need to act and progress from what we have already done. And I mentioned in my opening remarks when I was setting the scene that we already had some global initiatives, ambitions on melting ice from Iceland and Chile, where we try to combine really the Arctic and Antarctica because ice is melting in both places and also in the Himalaya region. We have the upcoming decade of action for the cryosphere, and I believe because now we have actually these reports on the cryosphere, yearly reports, so we are actually seeing a change happening, that people are becoming more and more conscious that cryosphere is important wherever it is situated, and it can create global challenges. The only thing I want to be very clear about is that we also need to be mindful of the regional interests, because there are people living around the Arctic, there are people living in the Himalayas, there are people living around the Himalayas. These are, in the Arctic we have the indigenous people living in the US, in Canada, in Russia, Sweden, Finland, Greenland, Norway. So we have those, but we have also the local countries that need to be taken into consideration. So this is a multi-layered approach, I would say. We need to think about the nation states, we need to think about the different groups of people, and then we need to think about the global context. And I think the same approach could apply to this area, Hindu Kush Himalaya. We need to think about the region, the nation states, and then the global level of governance.
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm very honored. And I echo Catherine, actually, inclusivity of governance. I'm a lawyer by training, so I would like to bring some jurisdictional aspects. So in order to understand the integrated approach for cryosphere governance in the polar region, we need to understand what polar regions are we talking about. So we have, if we are talking about, Arctic, Antarctic, and also third pole region, then they have actually different settings. So we need to understand what that settings are. For example, if we talk about Antarctic, Antarctic has a very clear, comprehensive legal governance regime, which is, ruled by Antarctic Treaty System, and there is no human settlement there. So that is completely different setting. And then when you bring Arctic into context, of course, Arctic has, national states, Arctic has indigenous people, Arctic has territories within the national jurisdiction and also beyond the national jurisdiction. And Arctic has high sea, which is open for everybody, even though, under the high sea, the continental shelf is kind of divided amongst the three Arctic nations. So there are this jurisdictional complex. But when we bring third pole, Hindu Kush Himalayan region, so there we see some similarity between Arctic and Hindu Kush Himalayan region, because they have also people. They have also indigenous people there in the third pole Hindu Kush Himalayan region. But only thing is that, there is no areas beyond national jurisdiction. So all the areas are within one or the other state's national jurisdiction. So this complex setting has to be understood first. And having said that, of course, we were talking a lot about commonalities. There are commonalities. So we should take the effort of understanding from each other. So we don't want to say that all these regions are should be governed in a similar way. So we have to take into consideration the local context and local dynamics that are present there. But at the same time, we need to also understand how system works in each of the polar regions, and we learn from the polar region. So if I bring examples of Arctic Council, for example, because I'm from the one of the Arctic states, so how it works in the governance framework. So we are talking about Arctic Council a lot in this conference. So in the Arctic Council, as Catherine was saying, that there is a comprehensive structure of governance regime that you can see. There are member states, there are indigenous peoples' participations, which are, they are called permanent participants. So there are 6 representatives, organizations from indigenous peoples representing in the Arctic Council, and there are observer states, like non-Arctic observer states and also European observer states, and then observer stakeholders. So there are different layers and there are many different actors. For example, I also represent University of the Arctic. We have been discussing or talking about University of the Arctic as a network of universities in the Arctic region. So they also promote knowledge that can be replicated or that can be translated into kind of governance framework that provide, kind of ground to develop governance. So that could be learned when we talk about third pole Hindu Kush Himalayan region. I think Dr. Pema could tell us more about the structure of Himalayan University Consortium, which is actually built, following the U-Arctic model, University of Arctic model. So I stop here.
Dr. Pema, would you like to add some points on this?
I think I've been watching the US Congress quite a lot. So I yield my time to the new speakers, Professor Makino and Professor Hinomoto. And I'll come back later.
Okay, okay. So we'll move back to move to thematic area 2, which is transboundary water governance and climate security. And I would like to ask Professor Makino to just share his perspective on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in the previous session, the professor made a very good presentation lectures. And I myself, I am an ocean policy researcher, and this is my first time to join the conference discussing about the glaciers or high mountains or rivers. So I am learning a lot. And yes, we are facing the very risk of, flash flood or extreme events or, landslides. This is very dangerous for the local people. Yes, I learned a lot. But one thing I would like to mention now is the disaster. Disaster itself is very, of course, tragedy, but disaster is the time to collaborate. Disaster is a time to help each other. Let me share the experience from Japan. In Japan, we have many earthquakes and tsunamis, of course. For example, in 2011, we experienced serious great tsunami. We lost dozens of thousands of lives at the coastal communities. That was a tragedy, yes. But after tsunami, we received supports and assistance from more than 100 countries. It was so impressive. And we are still forever, the Japanese people are very grateful for that. We will never forget the support from foreign countries. So this is why I would like to emphasize disaster is the time for international collaboration and cooperation. So I think I would like to point out the importance of creating a new kind of program for emergency mutual support, mutual help when some disaster happens in this area. Not only the Hindu Himalaya area, but also including Arctic and Antarctic areas. Because, mutual support will be the very nice opportunity to build mutual trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Magnus Sensei. I would like to come back to Dr. Pema again. So transboundary water governance, I think this is your topic, and I would like to know your perspective, how this is possible and what we have to do.
Thank you very much. Now we have to define what we mean by water governance, because water at a community level, I think it has to start from there, bottom-up approach, because water is something that everybody needs, and it has to start from a village level. Now what is happening there? What kind of governance structure is there? So I think it has to come at the community level, then the national level, and then the regional level. So I think it cannot be driven top-down approach. So we can talk about water use, water information, water use efficiency, watershed management, and of course, how do you deal with the wastewater and so on. So governance covers a lot of areas, and we need to be very clear about what we mean by transboundary water governance. So this is something that will have to eventually develop on its own. It has to be organic. It cannot be something that we can just dictate, okay, this is how there's no prescription for it. We cannot say, now this is how we govern water, because water is a dynamic element. So, but what we do at ECMO is we have these networks. So for water risk management, for example, we have the disaster risk reduction hub. So where we bring in the scientists from the different, from our member countries as well as experts from outside to discuss topical issues. So they share the knowledge, they share the experience, and see what can be taken up together and what has to be done individually. So thematic working groups, not just water, across also Cryosphere. Now we have working groups on Cryosphere, where the scientists come and present their research work, their findings, and sometimes we bring the policymakers together so that the policymakers are aware of these issues and then integrate into their policy and even legislative system. So that is how we see the build-up.
Thank you, Dr. Pema. And moving to your comments and following that comments, it's not only about water, but monitoring, like Cryosphere monitoring, which is our third thematic area. how science policy collaboration for cryosphere monitoring can be utilized and can be realized for risk management. So I would like to move on to Professor Inomoto to just share his perspective on this.
Thank you for this opportunity. Cryosphere or glacier is a common component on the global climate, and Antarctica and Arctic has already strong focused area in the climate change, and also the Himalayan region, Himalaya Hindu Kush, is very important. And so in the when we focus the glacier change, the IPCC report, last one is a SROC, so-called SROC, special report on cryosphere and ocean in the changing climate. Reported so both polar region and also high mountain region. And then that focus the cascading impact. Is the ice in the high mountain is melting, then more water supply, water flow, and it may cause flooding in the higher region, and then that water could come to the plain and reach to the ocean, and all connected and transboundary maybe, and this is happening in the, for example, currently happening. What we see 10 years later, the ice in the high mountains already melted out, and no flooding happening, but and also water shortage is happening in the plain region. So it's in different place and different time the disaster can happen, and we should forecast. And there is they need the transboundary management, and then we call attention to the so governance people or each area in the not only current attention but futures attentions. And also I want to also enhance emphasize one point. Those data is coming from the scientist effort, and scientist is supported by not every time very sufficiently or continuously. The individual group scientist or group's effort is contributing the glacier inventory, and if some scientist retires or science budget is cut or terminated, the effort will be terminated. So fragile the effort. And the previous session shows a very good report from the field scientists, science facing the real glacier region and also mountain villages. And their effort is very noble. And that effort also should be supported by government. And then the data is stored in the database. And it's such a noble data after due to the very strong effort from the field scientist is stored in the database and open to the public use or climate assessment report. But the database itself is not so stable. We, during the international conversation, we encountered some permafrost database is so disappearing because of the finance problem. Data is not deleted, but supporting the data server had problem. And that is not only one institute's problem, but we can care that data server for the global networks. And also glacier inventory is also very good storage of the glacier information. And it needs more information maybe, but the already stored glacier inventory data is also sometimes very dangerous situation. Who can maintain that? And that maintenance will be the responsibility of global governance. That's my point.
Thank
if
you.
I might add,
Surely, surely.
because we're talking about systems of governance, and as was explained earlier, they are different between different regions, they are multi-layered, they are international, national, and regional. Those are the systems of governance, and they rely on the collaboration, intergovernmental collaboration. And I can say that here that I am a great spokesperson for the multilateral system and intergovernmental collaboration, and coming from a small state, Iceland, which bases its existence on the fact that we have a system where sovereign states can have a dialogue on equal ground. I think that is a very important fact that we need to acknowledge, and we should be very mindful of that the global multilateral system has achieved a lot. But at the same time, we need non-governmental dialogue, like we're having here, like the Arctic Circle Assembly is all about, where we introduce scientists, policymakers, politicians, and all sorts of stakeholders to actually have that informal dialogue, which is so necessary to be able to get some results from international collaboration between governments. And I listened to what you said about disaster is the time for collaboration. I could not agree more, because often when disasters happen, as terrible as they are, we see some fine examples of intergovernmental collaboration. But then it also matters that we have had the informal dialogue, between those happenings. And when tensions are great, and when interaction is difficult, this has never been more important. So I would just like to say that, because I think it's important to clarify that on one side we have intergovernmental interaction and collaboration, but then we have all the informal collaboration, which is really the grassroots, which is so important for what happens next.
Indeed. I think, Professor Mark.
Yes, I just would like to follow that discussion. Yeah, the theme 3 is science policy collaboration, but I would like to add science policy society collaboration is very important. Yeah, please let me again share some experiences in ocean policy science. In the ocean policy field, we have the concept of transformative ocean science. It means, the local people, the society should be incorporated, working together with researchers. From the very beginning of the research design, for example, we often call co-design ocean research with local people, right? And also we co-research together. It includes the citizen science, which we discussed in this morning, and we co-implement our scientific finding to the society, and then society can find what is successful and what is the shortcoming of our scientific knowledge. Then that will give us the feedback, and we can modify our program, our model, or our concept. And we improve our scientific project. So incorporation or engagement of the society or the stakeholders are very important part of producing the knowledge which is really applicable to the society. Yes. Thank you.
Definitely, Professor Makino. Is integration, and following that point, our fourth thematic area is indeed society, local community knowledge, how we can integrate it. And he rightly mentions, we often talk about interdisciplinary, but we rather forget about transdisciplinary, where we bring out society, work together, co-design it, and co-implement it. They know it. The community, they are living there for 100, probably thousands of years. They know the solutions, they know the adaptation, mitigation measures. But somehow it's not in the policy, not in the adaptation books and chapters written by all the international intergovernmental panels or whatever institutionalized formation it is. So it's a very important to bring those society, transboundary, transdisciplinary approach in this solution. So moving to fourth thematic area, I would like all of our speakers to provide their short perspective on how this local knowledge, indigenous practices, indigenous knowledge can be incorporated in climate adaptation mitigation solutions. Ms. Catherine?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's important that on the one hand we have the indigenous groups which around the Arctic share a lot of knowledge and experiences which I think are extremely important when we are making policy decisions on the Arctic. We also have the local communities, which is not exactly the same, because not all of them are indigenous, but they also need to be taken into consideration and thought. I will confess that I have learned a lot since I began my involvement with the Arctic Circle Assembly after leaving formal politics. I have learned a lot really on the fact that the indigenous groups have a vast amount of knowledge and experience that it's very important to listen to. And sometimes we have conflicts between that and traditional scientific work. We have experienced that in the Arctic. And I think it's really important for those of us who really want to strengthen collaboration to have open eyes and try to tackle those conflicts in a positive way. Because I think there is so much that we can learn from the indigenous peoples living around the Arctic, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere in the world. And then it's very important to take into account the local communities also and their experiences, and that's why I mentioned this governance structure within the Arctic Council, which I think has proven to be in many ways solid, but is of course encountering challenges that we have talked about a lot these 2 days, and then that really shows the importance of what I mentioned earlier on the informal dialogue, which we always must be mindful of. But I think we have a really enormous value in the knowledge and experience of the indigenous groups from where I know best, which is in the Arctic.
Dr. Pema.
Thank you very much. I think organizations, specifically like ICIMOD, being a knowledge learning and sharing center, our role is to bring together all stakeholders, including indigenous groups, to the table so that they can listen to science, they can listen to the policies, provide their inputs, and also participate in the processes involved in policy making, in legislation, and so on. But institutions like ours should be responsible for providing the decision support system, the tools for taking decisions. Now, in terms of taking the actual decision, whether to convert those into policies or into laws, is really up to the sovereign states. So we as knowledge organization should be able to facilitate the provision of that knowledge and information. Now, indigenous knowledge, again, we have to be very mindful now, because sometimes if you look at a specific group of indigenous people, they're also now influenced by modern externalities. Tourism. Now they also want to have employment. They also want to make money. So sometimes, depending on the opportunities available, you can also put the indigenous knowledge on the back shelf. So a balanced approach is always the best approach. That's my belief.
Thank you. Professor Makino, please.
Yes, I completely agree with you, the importance of the learning from the indigenous group. But at the same time, yes, as Pema-san pointed out, the balanced approach, all the policy measures should be science-based. In that sense, we need a kind of science communicator or interpreter of our scientific knowledge to the local, understandable, easy to implement languages. Now, I have a lot of experiences working with coastal fishermen in Japan, and they never want to listen to the technical terms. Of course, no. They never want to use the scientific jargon. No, never. So we need kind of interpreter. So in University Tokyo, we have a specific program for the producing the scientific communicator. The kind of interpretation of the pure scientific knowledge or pure scientific finding into the local context based on the local value. This is very important for the communication. Also for the early warning system or evacuation training or, this is very important for the risk management as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei. Since we are running out of time a little bit, I would like to request Dr. Kamrul and Professor Inomoto to keep the comments short. Yeah.
Okay, I would be very brief. I would not want to say indigenous, indigenous knowledge is often said as traditional knowledge. So that makes some confusion sometimes whether they're outdated or that. So I would say that this knowledge is evidence-based knowledge. So as a lawyer, when we talk about environmental governance, and the root of environmental governance actually draw a line between top-down approach and bottom-up approach. Actually, one is like absolute sovereignty, and another one is no harm doctrine. So in that context, what I would suggest, I just bring the example of Arctic Council, for example. There, as I said, that indigenous peoples participate in the Arctic Council's governance framework as permanent participants. So they are integrated in a governance framework, even in the lawmaking process. So there are two examples I can say. One is search and rescue agreement. Without the knowledge of indigenous people, it's very difficult to implement the search and rescue agreement. And other one is Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement, where indigenous knowledge has been heavily integrated. So therefore, I would say that those knowledge held by indigenous people are evidence-based, and that has to be recognized and that has to be integrated when we talk about Western science. Thank you.
Short comment. Japan is implementing the big Arctic project, and many people are going to the local area in Arctic region. And in Greenland or Alaska, so we meet the local people and indigenous people, and then we try to explain why we come here and what we will take in this year from the observation and share to the local community. And after it takes 10 years. After 10 years, they know what we are doing, what is the achievement and what is the benefit for them. And then they help our research work. We work only summertime, but they can carry out observation in winter time. And also, some people learn how to operate the sensor, and also they pointed out more ideal place, so more good place to observe, not our part. So that is such collaboration needed 10 years, but it's now we can work with them.
Thank you, Professor Inomoto. And since we are running quite late, we have about 10 minutes. I will open the floor for the questions. I know the questions would be complex. I do understand. Please try to make it very brief and concise so that we can answer. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for the interesting conversation, especially about the governance structure. While we miss the reality that the governance structure that we have in the Arctic is very much different from what we have in the Himalayas, right? And most of the time, the governance structure, no matter how much we say we need civil society members, the political as well as geopolitical realities reflect or manifest itself into our informal conversations as well. I did not hear a Russian voice in this forum, actually. But my question to Pema, you have a very tricky job of navigating a region where you have India and Nepal and Bhutan and China and definitely Pakistan as Himalayan regions, and three of the countries do not look eye to eye with each other. How do you navigate it? It's tricky for you. How do you navigate this? How do you, leading Ikimod, manage to bring the consensus together in order to ensure sustainability and development in the Himalayan region?
Thank you very much. Shall I? Okay. Well, as I said in the morning session, I think is about being aware of the geopolitical sensitivities of each of our member countries. So ICIMO, we consider ourselves as a neutral convener, as a platform for bringing the scientists. So we have been very successful in under varying conditions, under very difficult conditions. We have been continuing to bring the scientists together, the bureaucrats together, sit across the table and discuss these common issues. And sometimes there are also contentious issues, but then we are able to navigate that quite successfully. So I think ICIMO's value is in that it is at the moment perhaps the one platform which every country in the region can use to share the experiences, to share the issues, to share the common challenges. So that is how we navigate. Now, you look at our publications, you will not find any maps with political boundaries, for example. You will find it in a watershed form or biophysical, delineations, but you will not find. So that way, I think we have been quite successful in keeping the region's, common interest together.
Thank you, Dr. Pema. We had some, yeah.
My question is to Professor Kamrul Hussain. So I really liked what you said, traditional knowledge versus, not to call it traditional knowledge because it seems outdated, but to call it evidence-based knowledge. So that was very nice. But I wanted to know about local communities. How protected are they? In the sense, indigenous people on their land, when you make a windmill farm, or if you drill for oil or for minerals. So just let's take between Norway and Russia. What kind of protection does the community have? Do they get part of the profits? So just an information, actually. So can you give us some sense of what really happens?
Well, I think in Nordic countries, especially in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, indigenous Sami people are more protected nationally. And also these countries follow the international regulations like International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And also Norway, for example, is a party to ILO 169 convention, which gives more protection. And these three countries have also Sami parliaments. So there, Sami people have some mandate. So in Norway, it is more advanced. And specifically to answer to your question, of course, in Russian context, it is a little bit tricky. Even though Russia is a party to, human rights conventions, but in many times they don't implement at the ground level. So that's complicated. But just specific to your question, sharing of revenues or sharing of kind of efforts. So in Norway now, a just green transition has become an issue where indigenous people's rights are compromised when non-renewable energy production, especially wind turbines, are built. So there are cases in Norway. So indigenous people share now, they have an agreement, Sami people have an agreement with Norwegian government by which until 2043, they have specific shares. And after that, the treaty will be negotiated based on the concession agreement between Norwegian government and wind turbine companies. So that's the specific kind of answers to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kamrul. I think we can take two more questions. So, yeah, at the back. They're at the back. Okay, after that.
I am Kamrul Muthukrishnan from the Center of Arctic Studies from Naval War College, Goa. My question is to the chair, Catherine, ma'am, to you. Ma'am, actually Russia owns 52% of the Arctic, I would put it. And anything what we speak on Arctic, if Russia is not included, what benefit do we gain altogether? That is one question. And the second question, being an Indian, is, are we not pushing Russia into the hands of China by the entire Arctic community isolating Russia in this entire forum? Thank you.
To say first, within the Arctic Council, of course, it has been a great challenge that Russia has not been participating. However, there has been now signs under the Norwegian chairmanship that the working groups are working together again, and there we are talking about scientists working together. But let's also remember that this did not happen, this did not come out of nowhere. This happened, of course, after an illegal invasion into Ukraine. And coming from a small state that bases its existence on the fact that international law should be followed, I think it's very normal that we react when international law is broken and territorial borders are not respected. So I think this response was perfectly justifiable, but it has, of course, created challenges. And as has been mentioned here in sessions, of course, we need to think about how this will develop when hopefully there can be found some solution to this war. But let's not forget that this did not happen because of nothing. It happened because of that invasion.
So can we get the last question over there?
My question is to Prema Gaisma sir, that you're talking about water security, which is main problem emerging due to overuse of water or deglaciation. Very simple question about that. There are some spots which are actually needed more attention. One of that is Sachin Glacier. So is it, it has never been in the discussions. It is completely absent, and this is very sensitive issue to protect this Sachin Glacier is very important for Himalayan ecology. And one place is Kishanganj, that is that receives excess of waterfall in the Himalayan Tarai region, and it is a plain region. And here we can develop to store the excess of water, because to use this in arid seasons. So these things, I think from the other, I have gone through the EC board research, and I'm a regular visitor, regularly visiting this site. So there are some spots which really needed to be focused. What is your opinion, sir?
Thank you very much for that question. And I always mention that climate change is about, the impact is about water. It's about either too much water or too little water. So there are spots where we have too much water and we have disasters, and there are places where we have too little water and equally disasters. So we need to address that, and one of the things that we are doing is, together with our partners across the region, in India too, with the Himalayan states partners. Basically, I would also like to explain that when you talk about ICIMOD, we are talking about all of us in this whole. The partners from within the country, from across the globe, we are all working together, because we only work through our partner institutions. So that's why, again, one example is the spring shed management. Springs are drying up. So when you talk about climate refugees, we don't have to wait for the sea level to rise and then the people to flee from the coastal areas. Actually, because springs are drying up, there's no more water available even for drinking, people are already moving out. Those are climate refugees. So we are trying now to revive these dead springs and prevent these springs from drying. So there is a protocol, and there is where we have been involving the local communities, the indigenous knowledge, bring their knowledge together as to where the original sources used to be, where the original recharge area used to be, and the discharge spots used to be, and then bring those together and come up with this strategy. So this has been now in practice for some time. Now I'll just quickly take 1 minute to answer the previous question you had on the Himalayan, I think from Himalayan University Consortium. This gives us the opportunity to invest in our future. So we hope that with the through the Himalayan University Consortium, we will link up with universities across the globe and within our own region to train young scientists, to train young leaders through developing common curriculum, through exchange of students, scholarships. one university in India could set aside 10 scholarships for students from other universities. Similarly, with some of the Arctic Circle universities and so on, and likewise exchange of faculty. Remember, so this would be really something that we would like to focus on as we move on. And I just want to end I will not speak again. I just want to say that
I think
through these dialogues, we have been able to now formally establish a partnership with the Ocean Policy Research Institute of Japan. We will be signing an MOU in the next couple of days, and we hope that there would be more partnerships coming forward. Thank you very much.
thank you, Dr. Pema, and we are already out of time. So we'd like to thank all of our panelists and thank you all the audiences. Have a good evening.